Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be revamping an old design that I did not do a tutorial on. We are going to be working on this neon leopard striped rainbow tumbler, whatever you want to call it. We're going to start off using a 32-ounce Plump from the Tipsy Magnolia. This one is pre-prepped, so I didn't have to do any sanding or painting. And we're going to start right off by breaking our tumbler down into 11 equal stripes. So we're gonna alternate the stripe of leopard vinyl, a stripe of glitter, stripe of vinyl, stripe of glitter. So we need to break that down pink, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple into the glitters, and then we're gonna have every other stripe be the vinyl. So we're gonna break that down, and it comes out to, I believe, it was either 0.91 or 0.93 for 11 stripes on this tumbler specifically. If you're using something different, then you need to measure your tumbler and divide that by 11. Don't just go off of my measurements. So I'm going to mark the stripes of the vinyl the same size that I marked on my tumbler, and then I'm just going to manually cut those out. You can also just break it down in your Cricut or Silhouette, whatever you want to use, if it's easier for you to do it that way if you don't have this paper cutter. So once those stripes are all cut out, we are going to start laying them down on the tumbler. You can glitter your tumbler first, but I will tell you that it's very hard to make sure when you're glittering a rainbow ombre that you're hitting every single color equally on the tumbler to make sure that it actually shows under, like, over the vinyl. So I glitter after I put my vinyl down. That way I can ensure that every single one of my rainbow colors is going to show on each of the stripes, and we don't have any more of one color or less of another color. So that's just why I do it this way. It seems a little backwards, but there is a method to my madness. So whatever you guys want to do with it is fine with me, but this is just how I make sure that all of the rainbow colors are actually showing. When I lay down my vinyl stripes, I make sure that all of the seams are in one spot, so they're all going to be on one vertical line on the back of the tumbler. We're going to put a decal over it to kind of hide that seam line. So if you have them all over the place, you're going to see seams all over. If you have them just in one simultaneous line down the back of the cup, we can easily cover that up with some vinyl work. I've been trying really hard to be conscious of the vinyls that I have on hand. I have probably 2 lifetimes worth of printed vinyl in my vinyl shelf, and I just keep buying more. So I'm really trying to be conscious and use that stuff up in my tutorials before I buy new. Of course, you know, there are those patterns that really just suck me in and I have to buy them. But that being said, this vinyl is from BAMF Custom Creations. I got this several years back and I just had bought several copies of it, and I don't know if this is permanent or temporary, but she is closed, so you're not going to be able to get this pattern if you don't already have it on hand. But this tutorial is just something for your inspiration. You don't have to use this exact print of leopard. You could use florals. I would recommend a pattern that's not really oversized, because you're cutting it to such thin stripes that you want to make sure that the elements are actually showing and they're not all cut in half. But you can definitely, you know, alter the glitters or alter the vinyl to fit whatever design you want to use. It's just a basis for inspiration, and I would love to see what you guys do with it. After the leopard vinyl is down, we're going to take some painter's tape and run that along the stripes of the vinyl that we just laid down. We want to make sure this is really tight on here and that there's not going to be any paint or glitter seeping underneath this tape line. So just make sure you're running your hands along the tape to make sure there's a good seal between the tape and the vinyl. And then once that's covered up, we'll get started on our spray painting and glitter process. I didn't record the painting process, but I just allocated a spray paint color to each of the stripes, and I let it cascade a tiny little bit over into either the stripe below it or the stripe above it, just so there's a little bit of an ombre effect. It was just a quick paint process, nothing like super finicky. And then once that paint's dry, we're gonna go over it with the epoxy method to start our glittering process. Now this is a really long tutorial. I beat out last week's long tutorial record, but I did a kind of live voiceover. I'm talking to you guys while I'm doing the glittering process. I just figured it would be a lot easier to hear me talking in the moment than it would be to listen to a voiceover. So that is on just 1x speed. It's not sped up for you guys. So it is a little bit longer than normal, but there's a reason for it, and I hope it helps you guys out a little bit. So I'll let this play through, and I'll see you guys in the next steps. So I want to try and leave a little bit of epoxy on this end, on this end, on this end, like basically at the tape lines on the top and bottom, because I want it to be able to ombre down and up so we can get that good fine blend. So I'm not going to do full coverage along the tape lines, and that will just help us give us good blend. So I'm gonna take a little bit of pink, very, 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 very lightly, and I'm aiming right here. And when it hits, it's gonna fall down and cascade barely into that orange. You can tilt your cup just a tiny bit to help it. That's what it should look like. And then I'm gonna switch colors. We're gonna blend the orange into the pink at the top, as well as the yellow on the next stripe. Again, we're gonna hit the middle of the tape line here to give it a blend up into the pink. Tilting your cup at about 45 degrees. Hitting the tape line again, but we're gonna cascade down. And we're gonna let it fall into this yellow. So we've got a little orange and the yellow. We're gonna bring the yellow here and then back up into the orange. Hitting that tape line again. And I'm letting the yellow go into the green. So we're gonna cascade back up into the yellow. Actually, Actually, I'm gonna hit that tape line. And then hit the tape line, tilt my tumbler down. We're not doing full coverage again for any of these, because if you do full coverage, it's gonna soak up all the epoxy and then it's not gonna let you adhere your glitter to anything. So I'm gonna go a little bit with the green down into the blue, hitting this tape line. And then blue, we're gonna cascade up. And then hitting this tape line, we're gonna go down. We're gonna let it go a little bit into the purple. Ooh, too much. And we're gonna do full coverage on the bottom with the purple. Make sure we get that bottom. Need to bring the purple back up into the blue. So I'm hitting this tape line right here. So that's our look. I want to blend a little bit more orange and yellow here, and then a little bit more orange into the pink. So I'm gonna go back and do that. So I'm happy with that blend. I'm gonna take this and pat it down with a piece of printer paper to make sure everything's nice and smooth, and then we'll peel that tape. Once your glitter is how you like it and everything's patted down, we're gonna set that on a drying rack to dry, adhering to your epoxy's guidelines. I did spray seal this several times before I put my first coat of epoxy on, because I didn't want any of my glitter to kind of get down into my vinyl sections when I applied the epoxy to the cup. So just spray seal or use polycrylic or glitter glue, whatever you want to use, whatever your favorite method is, but I would definitely recommend sealing it. I still got a few stray pieces of glitter in the vinyl sections. I did just pick those out with my X-Acto knife. I'm using Flynn Sisters fast setting epoxy, and I want to say I used probably about 60 milliliters of epoxy for this first coat. The viscosity or the thickness of this epoxy is much thicker than normal, so it gives a really good coverage, but it does take a little bit more epoxy to cover it just because it's harder to spread just because of the thickness. So once that fast setting coat was cured, I just gave it a quick sanding with my sanding block. Everything was mostly smooth because we did a good job patting that glitter down. So not a ton of maintenance as far as like pokey glitters go. And then once that's sanded down and completely smooth, we went over it with 91% rubbing alcohol to get rid of that epoxy dust. If you need to do another coat of epoxy, definitely do that. You don't want to have any pokey bits of glitter showing under your vinyl work. So do that if you need to, but we're gonna go in with this striping of the textured silver metallic from Tech Wrap Craft. I cut it at 11.5 width by 0.06 in height, and we're going to stripe that on both the top and bottom sections of vinyl. And then once that is completely covered, I did put this on my turner with a coat of polycrylic just to make sure that this really thin vinyl striping didn't lift under epoxy. Really thin vinyl is notorious for kind of lifting under epoxy. It's like it just seeps under where the seam is and it lifts it up. So it's a real headache to deal with if it lifts up. So I'm always proactive and just put a coat of polycrylic, and you'll see I'm rubbing my hand left to right, which is the direction that the vinyl is laying. I don't want to go against the grain because it's going to encourage that vinyl stripe to lift up. So I'm going left to right instead of right to left. And then once that polycrylic is cured, it's about 30 minutes till it's dry to the touch. I went over this with a thin coat of UV epoxy. You can do a regular coat of epoxy. I was just trying to speed up the process. This is just going to help cover up the vinyl striping. We're not going to do a full true coat of epoxy under this, or over this, I guess, but under our Summer Vibes decal. But if you just lay that Summer Vibes decal right over top of your kind of raw vinyl striping without anything over it, you're going to see bumps under your Summer Vibes decal. So definitely need something there as a buffer. You'll see, like I said, you'll see the lines there if you don't. I made sure to torch that UV epoxy to get rid of any micro bubbles, and then I let that cure under my UV lamp, make sure it's not tacky at all. And then I cut out this decal. This one says summer, and then I'll do vibes in black. We are going to glitter ombre this decal as well because I am just beyond extra. You don't need to do this. I just wanted to show you guys something new. One thing I would recommend, so we're going to use the tack it method over this. So I cut the decal out. I didn't weed it, but I would recommend spray painting your vinyl or using a rainbow colored vinyl. I would say probably more spray paint versus rainbow vinyl. That way you can control where each color of the rainbow lands on your letter. I had to do 3 coats of this tack it method to get any sort of vibrance with this decal. So if you spray painted it versus using it just on a plain white base, you're going to get way better coverage with that spray paint than you would on just the white. It's going to save you from having to go back over this multiple times. So just a word of advice, you can do it on white if you want, but just be prepared to not have great coverage. Or if you want it to look more pastel than neon, you could do just a white because it was giving more pastel vibes than neon vibes. So one thing that I did, I used the exact same glitter colors, which is the Chase Rae 2.0 neon bundle. I'll link that for you guys with the discount code below. It is a like mini chunky mix. I didn't want to use the tack it method with any sort of chunky glitter. So what I'm doing is taking my tea strainer, and I showed you guys this in a past tutorial or two. And I'm going to use the glitter, and I'm just going to use the tea strainer and shake that out. And that is only going to let the fine cuts of glitter come through that strainer and go onto your decal. So you're not going to get good coverage if you're using a chunky glitter mix, but if you're using fine, you can blend it really well. It will lay down flat. It's not going to leave gaps in your decal where the vinyl is exposed. And it worked out really well. I just wish I had base painted this vinyl first, but in the end, we succeeded. We completed the task and came out fine. So once that's all done, I'm going to weed this. You do have to be really careful because of the coats of polycrylic, and probably because I had to do 3 separate coats. It contributed to it being a little bit harder to weed this out, but you do have to be mindful that there is some glue that is basically adhering the vinyl that's uncut and the decal, so it doesn't weed as seamlessly as like a regular vinyl without glitter would. So just be careful when you're pulling that apart. I did do 2 of them. I didn't need 2 of the decals, but I figured if I screwed anything up, I would have something, you know, that matches that I could just replace the letter with. So I ended up just keeping that second one for another project. I don't know if I'll use it or not, but I would recommend doing that just so your colors match up on your ombre too. I did do a black offset of Summer. That was just to help it stand out from the stripes and from the glitter in the first few layers. Because they're the same colors, they're going to tend to blend together. And one thing I made sure to do was ombre the glitter colors in the decal opposite of what I ombre'd the cup. So on the cup we have pink at the top and purple at the bottom. With the decal, I started the S in Summer as pink and ended it with the R being purple. That's because we're going to put the S at the bottom of the cup where the purple stripe is, and then the R is going to be at the top where the pink stripe is. So that's just going to help contrast those 2 colors, help the decal to stand out. They do tend to just kind of muddle together if it's the same glitter on the decal as well as the background of the tumbler. So that was why I did it that way. You can totally blend them together, the same colors if you want to, but I would definitely recommend, if you're going to do that, that you do a tiny little black offset. I believe this offset was like a 0.050 if I remember correctly, or 0.055. I don't remember exactly, but do it whatever size you want. We're going to apply that directly over top of this UV base, and you'll see here what I mean about the glitter colors contrasting. So purple on pink and pink on purple. And we're going to lay that down, and then we'll lay Vibes in Black directly over top of the Summer decal. And I do overlap them just a little bit. I think it looked a little bit better that way than doing them further apart. There was a little bit too big of a gap between the 2 words, so I just overlapped them a little bit, and I actually really like how it turned out. I didn't record it, but after the Summer decal was laid down, I actually sprayed a coat or 2, I think it was 2 coats of Krylon Triple Thick spray over top of the rainbow glitter ombre in the decal. There was no sealing to that whatsoever, so I didn't want any of that, again, to cascade into my vinyl section, so I sprayed that. And then after Vibes was laid down, I put a coat of polycrylic over top of it as well. If you guys have followed my channel at all in the past, you know that I really try to keep my tumblers looking clean and my stripes crisp and no glitters, you know, where they shouldn't be. So these are just the steps that I take as precaution to make sure that everything looks nice and clean and crisp, and we don't have stray glitters. So you can seal as much or as little as you want to, but this is just how I do it. I get several questions on how I keep my tumblers looking so neat looking, I guess. And these are just the few things that I do. It doesn't take much time, but it does make a big impact. So once that polycrylic is dry over top of the decals, I'm gonna go in with one final coat. This is Flynn Sisters Artist Cure Resin. I did put a tiny little bit of Bright from Peach Yellow Glitters into my final coat of epoxy. That was just to put a little life into the leopard stripe vinyl. It looked a little bit dull and bland to me, and so I just put a tiny little bit in there to give it a little extra sparkle. And I want to say this is probably going to be maybe like 40 to 50 milliliters of epoxy on here. This tumbler is a little bit bigger than normal. So we're gonna put that on there and let that fully cure. We do want to torch out any micro bubbles. And then we've got one little extra thing here. After the final coat is done and cured, then we can go in with our rhinestones. You want to make sure this is your very last step. You don't ever want to epoxy over rhinestones because they do lose their luster if they're epoxied over. So once that's cured, we are going to put a little bit of glitter and UV resin mixed into the bottom as a base. And then we're going to use some Flynn Sisters rhinestones, or known as Flintstones. How clever, right? I ended up using a blue and a purple. I will tell you, inside you can tell the difference, but outside, because they have the same like not iridescent, I think it's Aurora Borealis is the AB is what it stands for. They've got that like multi-tone, like opaly type of shift to them. In the sunlight, they look the exact same color. You can't even tell the difference. So I would maybe use something that isn't as similar in color on yours if you really want it to look different. And then we're going to, after that glitter and epoxy mix is cured, we're going to use this little logo. It's from Mizzy's Doodles. I get a lot of questions about this as well. These are Mizzy's Doodles business logo tags, I believe is what they're called. I'll link them for you guys below. You just basically upload what you want it to say, and she cuts them out in acrylics, and they're perfect for these tumblers. And we're going to use UV resin again, filling that outer cavity and inner cavity. Less is more with this epoxy. You don't want it to kind of encase your rhinestone in epoxy. If you use too much, it does squeeze up from under the rhinestone and it encases the rhinestone in epoxy, and again it will lose its luster. So we're going to fill this outer ring with purple, all in the same size, and then we're going to fill the blue in with the blue rhinestones, and then once everything's in place, we'll cure that with our UV light and cup will be done. that's it for this tutorial. If you guys have hung around this long, thank you for watching this tutorial and supporting my channel. If you're not already, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell button for notifications on future tutorials, and I will see you guys in the next video.